Well, before you know it, Joe Fiano will be in some nationwide commercials because he's one of 8 college QBs to be on the Manning Award list after a stellar Week 6. We'll break down that Huskies QB performance. And from a guy who was red hot to a man whose passion could ignite 1,000 fires, Dan Hurley recently released a book giving fans a glimpse at his life behind the scenes and the struggles of last season. We'll catch up with that UConn coaching icon in a minute. But first,
you can call him Milestone Mora from one coach to another. Jim Mora's major victory. We'll highlight that and more. Connecticut Game Week starts now.
Well, Milestones, Manning's Manuscripts. That's where we start. The premiere of our brand new sports show here on Fox 61. Welcome to Connecticut Game Week. I'm Alexa Harley.
And I'm Sean Humphrey. The Huskies were all gas and no breaks against FIU en route to a 41-point win over the Panthers. They started off hot, heated up, and got hotter. And the Huskies were scorching on all cylinders last week. In fact, they got so hot, they get to cool off with a bye week. But first, they cruise into the bye after a milestone moment for one Jim Mora. And he wasn't the only coach to hit a major accomplishment, was he, Alexa?
Absolutely not.
UConn women's coach Chris McKenzie won his 200th game as a head coach, 13th season with the program. Quite the resume built up in his time as the Huskies head man. Back-to-back reigning Conference Coach of the Year, 2024 National Coach of the Year. Already 2 wins against ranked opponents this season for 199 and 200.
And it was a career night on the pitch for one Kyle Durham. He let nothing slip, recording a career-high 10 saves in UConn's win over Creighton last week. Now, this marked Durham's 5th clean sheet this season, good enough for 3rd best amongst active Big East ballers. Oh, and he also made 7 of those 10 saves in the final 30 minutes of play. No big deal to keep the Jays from soaring onto the scoreboard. He also snagged Big East goalkeeper of the week in the process.
Soaring onto the scoreboard, I like that. From one brick wall to another, Tyler Muslick told the Colorado College Tigers no, facing an onslaught with the Huskies down 2 men. UConn actually scored twice on 5-on-3 power plays. Tables turned, maybe, but the Tigers left home ice with empty bellies, 5-1. Thanks, Moose.
And it was all handshakes, hugs, and a little bit of hoopla this past weekend for one Husky head football coach Jim Mora after UConn absolutely trounced FIU 51-10.
It sure wasn't pretty, but a major Mora milestone was bigger than the final score. His 100th win sparked a celebration after the game, and you might be surprised at some of the big names congratulating him. Receiving the game ball seated on Husky shoulders, Coach Jim Mora isn't just being celebrated for the team's most dominant performance of the season, but make no mistake, 5 forced turnovers, 6 offensive touchdowns, and even a blocked punt meant the victory bell rang 51 times in UConn's win over FIU. But the number of the day is 100, the Huskies' most complete effort of 2025, sealing Mora's milestone win.
We've now won more games here than they'd won since 2013. They'd won 21. We've won 22 in 3.5 years. And to me, it starts with certain people and their commitment to football.
A post-game tribute video featured Hall of Fame names from Peyton Manning and Ronnie Lott to even Charles Barkley. Coaching, of course, is the Mora family business, meaning it may not have been much of a surprise to hear his 90-year-old father's congratulations from the stadium speakers. It also means UConn's head football coach is looking beyond win number 100.
I just want one more win. That's all I want in life right now. So, and I also know this, that it's also humbling because my dad, I still got like 85 to go to catch him. So that's incentive to keep coaching.
Quarterback Joe Fiano played a huge part in the milestone victory, tossing 4 touchdowns for the Huskies. But don't mistake the chance to make history as motivation. He all but called the post-game celebration a surprise party.
I had no idea. I didn't know at all until they didn't let us go in the locker room, turned around, saw the screen, and there was Peyton Manning.
And in his 3rd year with the program, the super senior says he's come to admire his head coach's leadership.
There's something about being around Coach Mora, how he operates, the way that he works, the way he goes about his business just makes you want to work that much harder.
Well, you heard QB1 Joe Fiano praise his head coach, but he also deserves a little commotion after his career day on the gridiron in Week 6. That Husky in the pocket had possibly his biggest performance of the season against FIU, and the fans at the Rent were the only ones who noticed. Once that coin was tossed, Vignano lit up, throwing 2 touchdowns in the first half to help put UConn up 24 points as they headed into the locker room. And then he doubled that TD total by the end of the day, 355 passing yards and a sizzling 78.6 completion percentage, a career day in the passing yards category as well for that QB. And Vignano was one of 8 quarterbacks to be named a Manning Award Star of the Week, but he didn't take all the credit for his sensational effort. No, our top dog says that he relies on his pack.
I feel good, but I think a lot of that is a tribute to just the offense as a whole. We got a lot of weapons on the outside and on the perimeter. It makes me look better, but it's really, it might be just them.
And it wasn't just his usual pass-catching culprit, that'd be Skylar Bell, making himself known. Vignano had help from some of the new faces, like Arizona transfer Ray Mello Murphy, who took one 61 yards to the house. Now, despite the obvious chemistry between those two, Vignano still says it's a process getting his new teammates involved.
It's a continuous build, and especially today's game, a lot of new people come in. Romello, Chris Parker, just some new transfers that you kind of have to. There's no time to waste. When they get here in the spring, it's full go. And he's a goofy guy, but when it's time to be serious, he is, and he catches one down the middle for a huge one. It always seems like he's catching it when I throw to him. But these guys have just elevated their game so much. It's been impressive to see.
And what's also impressive and worth mentioning here is that Vignano still hasn't thrown an interception this season. And he and the rest of the Huskies are enjoying a little R&R. They got the bye week this week, which means we don't have much more football to talk about, do we, Sean?
No, not much more football, but feeling the fall air means it won't be long until the Huskies hit the hardwood. We look ahead at what's next for both men's and women's hoops. And maybe you've heard of Sue Bird. If you haven't, she's got a list of accomplishments and accolades long enough to fill 3 CVS receipts. We'll look at the former Husky star's most recent achievement and hear what she had to say. Stick with us.
When the leaves start to change, those crisp shades of red, orange, yellow, you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Pumpkin spice lattes are back. PSL season's here. You know what else is almost here? Basketball season.
Not too far away at all. The first exhibition game for both men's and women's basketball for UConn next week against Boston
I know, you're
College.
excited.
I'm absolutely excited. Basketball is my favorite sport. While these games don't really count, it is the first time fans will really get to lay their eyes on this year's teams.
Well, let's talk about what this 2025-2026 women's product will look like. You can see on your screen, this is the list of 10 returnees for the Huskies. They were all a part of the national championship run last year. 2 of those are making their return from injury, and a third is hoping to build off their late season return last year. But with 10 vets, that leaves 5 other roster spots that are all occupied by new faces. And with all these new players, they probably won't experience this moment right here, the confetti falling on their shoulders, hoisting that national championship trophy high. I mean, that's the goal for UConn. Now, the elephant in the room is who's missing. This girl, phenom Paige Beckers, who was a part of the title run last year, is now enjoying her own professional career. But replacing her isn't the only challenge for this team. It's also about finding an identity with a handful of new additions to this year's squad.
I mean, this is a new team. Like, we've got a lot of new faces, a lot of returners, but 5 new faces. So I don't think we really consider ourselves defending champs, more so like same goal as last year, same mindset, but just some of us have the taste, so now we want it even more.
They have all really bought into what we're doing here, and they put in their best effort every single day, whether it's workouts, recovery, like anything we do, they're really integrating well, and it's just been fun to get to know them and play with them.
Now, while the women are coming off the mountaintop, the men are rowing in a much different boat. I have no doubt that Husky fans are aware that UConn was on track to three-peat last year, ultimately falling short in the second round with a loss to Florida. Obviously, it's a new year, new team, bigger roster, but the expectations in stores are the same: championship or bust. And Coach Hurley says spending this past offseason out of the national championship spotlight has given himself and his team a different perspective as it prepares to tip off a new season.
I just think this offseason we just had a lot more time, just because we were didn't have as many responsibilities like we've had the last 2 off seasons. So I think from a coaching standpoint, it just gives you more time to focus on your craft. I think in terms of the group, it changes your pursuit. Our pursuit of being championship caliber, our pursuit with absolutely everything we have is at a different level of urgency coming off of last season.
The journey back to championship form tips off with the first game of the season in November. Until then, we've got a good handful of exhibition games in our future, starting with Boston College on Monday. And speaking of basketball greats, there may be no one greater at the game than Sue Bird. Her career accolades speak for themselves, and we only have a 30-minute show, so I can't even begin to highlight every single achievement. But she recently checked off a major milestone in September after being inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. Alexa, you were there to speak with her ahead of all the ceremonies and pageantry. What did she have to say?
I think the biggest takeaway for Sue Bird was that she's still kind of figuring out who she is within the walls of retirement. That's pretty valid. I mean, this is a player whose is a college hoops champion 2 times over. Then she's drafted #1 overall, goes on to be a part of 4 WNBA title runs in 3 different decades, mind you, and then she's also got 5 measly gold medals, no big deal or anything. And that's just a few weeks ago. She actually hit one of her biggest accomplishments yet, being inducted in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And when she sat down and talked to all the media, she basically got to reflect on her career and dribble down memory lane. Bird's basketball journey traces all the way back to middle school. But when she was that young, her dreams were not to be on the court. Her aspirations were a little bit more mainstream, like becoming a doctor or a lawyer. At least that's what she said in her 5th grade yearbook. And I'm not sure what 5th grade Sue would think, knowing that her name would one day stand alongside basketball's best just a few decades later.
She wouldn't even believe it, right? I just mentioned there wasn't a pathway, right? There wasn't a professional league, which I think is what allows kids to really dream and dream big. As that little girl got older, she understood she could go to college. What did that even really mean? Like scholarship, okay, what does that look like? And then after that, it was kind of like the Olympics. That was the only other thing to really dream about. Nobody was dreaming about going overseas.
Aside from all the championships she helped secure, both on the collegiate and national floor, there is no shortage of solo records that belong to Sue Bird. She is the all-time WNBA assist leader with 3,234. She's played the most games in the league and subsequently has the most wins of any player in the history of the WNBA, with 336 victories. Bird is also the only ever player to win a championship in 3 different decades: 2004, 2010 and 2018, and 2020. And she's also a 5-time Olympic gold medalist. With so many accomplishments coming around every corner, it can be hard to just sit and enjoy it all in the moment. And she actually took some inspiration from fellow Hall of Famer Chris Bosh when she was reflecting on her own career.
I went back and looked up some previous speeches, and I stumbled onto Chris Bosh's. He tells a great story of cutting out, his heroes out of Slam magazine, putting them on the wall, and how he would look at them, and he's like, yeah, you see these players, and you're like, well, yeah, they're guaranteed to go in the Hall of Fame. He's like, and I'm sure some people, for me, would look at me, Chris Bosh, and say, oh, he's guaranteed to go in the Hall of Fame. And he's like, but when I look at my career, I never felt that. And that really hit. Because I think when you're going through it, all you're thinking about is all the things that could go wrong. You're so in the process of it, you never really see yourself the way others see you. But then when you're done and you retire, you can start to take that in more. You can start to look back and really understand the winning, really understand the impact in a totally different way.
Bird stepped away from the game back in 2022, but she hasn't exactly been chilling on a beach in Florida for her retirement. She launched Together Media Group with her partner Megan Rapinoe and hosts her own podcast called Bird's Eye View. She is also an owner of the Seattle Storm and is the first managing director of the USA Basketball Women's National Team for the 2028 Olympics. So she hasn't exactly been getting much R&R in her time away from basketball.
Women's basketball, or the game of basketball, has given me so much. And I think I just through my years, the way I played, people I came in contact with, it does feel like some version of a calling to stay involved. Whether it's talking about it, whether it's being in an ownership group, or ultimately, recently being named managing director for USA Basketball. I think taking that position, a lot of it was, there of course are other people probably more qualified to take that spot. But did anyone fit it as perfectly as myself? Did anyone really have the experience of USA basketball in the ways that I have over the last 20 plus years to, choose a coach, to choose the players. I don't think anyone has what I bring. And so with that, it felt only right to be a part of it. And of course, representing your country and having a chance to do that, albeit in a different way, was something I didn't want to turn down.
Even though she's booked and busy in her retirement, she is still figuring out who Sue Bird is away from the hardwood.
The truth is, I'm still, I think right now, in my retirement, figuring that out. I think the first year or two, there's more identity, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of a feel where you're figuring it out, but who are you? And I was this basketball player for so long, and now I'm a podcaster, what?
What? Sue Bird is a podcaster? And a pretty popular one at that. She actually interviews countless notable athletes, and she even told us after that she gets pretty competitive about those podcast numbers. And as far as what's next for Sue Bird, she talked about her managing director role for USA Basketball, and she's kind of starting that. Her attention's now aimed at creating the best roster imaginable to compete in LA in the 2028 Summer Olympics.
And hey, Alexa, I like her chances, but to find out what's going on with Coach Dan Hurley, you'll need to use the Dewey Decimal System. The 2-time national champion coach is an author, and Alexa sat down with him to find out more about his book, Never Stop.
Well, in the pride of Connecticut, the Yukon Marching Band will take its sound to one of the biggest stages in 2026, Manhattan, as the Huskies will march along Central Park all the way to 34th Street in the Centennial Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
What an accolade for them, and this also came as a surprise. The band found out on the Today Show that it had been invited. The initial shock notwithstanding, this will be the band's first trip to the parade Final Four's national championships. How's this for a resume?
Better than ours, that's all I can say. We're going to have more Connecticut Game Week when we come back.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and Coach Dan Hurley wrote a few more than that in his new book, Never Stop, released last week. He dug into some of his accomplishments and things he went through as a player and as a head coach. And Alexa Harley sat down with him to find out the behind the scenes, the rough and tumble of what went on in Dan Hurley's storied career. And Alexa, what can you tell us?
I think rough and tumble is a good word for Dan Hurley and his career, but we talked a lot about reading, what made him fall in love with it. And like you and I, we had to read books in high school, like Romeo and Juliet, To Kill a Mockingbird. We were graded on it, so it's kind of boring. But Hurley, okay, whatever. But Hurley fell in love with reading in college, and he's picked up and kept that habit ever since, even reading military books now as a head coach. And that probably helps him with some of the strategy that he has to do as a head coach. Now, a few years ago, the idea was sparked for him to write a book, but he wasn't a national championship yet. Flash forward a few years later, Hurley partnered with New York Times bestselling sports writer Ian O'Connor, and thus Never Stop, Life, Leadership, and What It Takes to Be Great was born. Coach Hurley, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You're a basketball coach, now an author of a book. How did that all come to be?
Books in general have had kind of like a big impact on my life, and not necessarily when they were assigned. As a college student, but I developed a love of learning, at a time in my life when I was going through some difficulties and some struggles during my college years. And I think what you read, what you listen to, I think it has a big impact on your mentality. Whether it's been memoirs or biographies that have been like motivating or inspiring, or books on personal development and leadership that have helped me in my career as a coach. Books for me have always been impactful in my life at a very critical stage.
You said you liked reading in college. Remember what the book was that kind of first piqued your interest?
The Winner Within by Pat Riley. It was, I would guess, prescribed to me by my therapist that I started working with at Seton Hall when I was really going through some difficult, dark times emotionally and mentally. And that book really really resonated with me. It helped me try to build an identity for myself. I think any time that I'm going through difficult times in my life, I lean on my family, I lean on my faith. And then I lean on reading. As a Man Thinketh, The Alchemist. There's certain books that I like to read at different times in my life that give me a lot of strength.
How involved are you in the process of putting the book together, since you do have another full-time job as a head basketball coach?
So yeah, the process with the book was, we did it, a lot of the legwork, the interviews, which was pretty extensive. We found time last summer to do a lot of those sit-downs. Really didn't deal with it at all during the season whatsoever. And then at the end of the year, obviously we had to unwrap the way that the season went and all the different things from Maui, the highs and mostly lows that the season was.
When you're going through last season and you know that you're writing this book, are you actively journaling through some of those hard times, or do you remember it all 6-7 months later?
I remember it all. I mean, I could put myself right now. I could tell you how fast or slow the bus driver was going on 95 after the Seton Hall loss. I could mentally, almost physically put myself back into Maui, where I was volcanic in a way, especially the losses, like the tougher moments. You have much more clarity as a coach.
What would be something in this book that might surprise people to learn about you or the past couple of seasons?
Just how open and honest I was in the book, or am in the book, about my personal life, my career, who I am as a man, father, husband. When you see a lot of these memoirs or projects by still active coaches or athletes or people that are in the public figures, they probably withhold a lot, whereas I didn't withhold much.
Well, I feel like you are that way in how you coach as well, very unfiltered, which I feel like some people love, some people maybe hate. Do you ever take issue with maybe how you get portrayed in the media?
Yeah, for me, the book project was a chance to be the narrator of who I am. I think that there's definitely a persona, and I'm not a victim. I've created it, and it is, for me, my superpower in terms of the way my teams play and the success I've had as a coach. I think it's what's made me successful, my intensity, my relentless competitive fire, the fact that at times I could be a little bit of a sore loser. It's part of what drives my teams, and it's driven my career, and I think it's helped drive championship level success. I don't think you ever enjoy the critiques, but I'm not a victim. I put myself in a position, by the way I carry myself, as a coach, where it's something that you could definitely analyze. And then people really don't start analyzing you until you win a lot. There's adjustments that coming through the year that I don't need outside critics to make me aware that I've got to have a better year coaching this year than I did last year.
Well, Hurley's talked about the expectations for this year and trying to get back to that championship caliber status that they enjoyed for 2 consecutive seasons. And Hurley and I talked about that for a while, and our discussion went far beyond his author endeavors. I asked him about how the way last season ended has fueled this group and how the landscape of college basketball has changed in the last few seasons, the portal, NIL, and how that affects his responsibilities as a coach. We also dipped into some of his holistic practices. Think red light therapy, cryotherapy. We talked about all of that, and you can catch that portion of the interview next week right here on Connecticut Game Week.
Hey, well, it's one of the most wonderful times of year with Husky hoops and hockey beginning, and they've already had pause on the pitch, too. Coming up, we look to the future and tell you what's in stores.
Springer cracks one, left center field. That's headed for the seats.
Spring in his step this postseason, the UConn baseball legend now tied for 5th most homers in Blue Jays playoffs history. But that's not why we're talking about him, is it, Sean?
No, he's one of a very elite list of players finalists for the Hank Aaron Award. We've got some time until the winner is announced, but he has been putting together quite the season. 309, 32 home runs, best batting average, and 3rd highest home run total of his career. How's that for year 12?
Well, and Springer also a part of World Series teams before, so we'll see if he and the Jays can make it that far all the way to the mountaintop on the diamond. Stay with us. More Connecticut Game Week when we come back.
We already mentioned earlier that hoops are on the horizon, but UConn is knocking on the door of more than just basketball season.
Football on the bye week, enjoying a little rest, relaxation. Then they have a road test at Boston College, but we do have many things in store in stores.
I love it.
Thank you.
UConn men's hockey, the Ice Bus, plays its first home games of the 2025-26 season, including spending next Saturday at the newly renovated People's Bank Arena. The team hosts the Ohio State Buckeyes, hoping to bring the Bonanza back to Connecticut.
Not
1-1 so far. Yeah, you gotta love the brass Bonanza. So far, 1-1 after splitting a series against Colorado College.
Well, and basketball is back, baby. You can't see Sean, but he's about to jump out of his shoes. Both the UConn men's and women's squads will officially take to the hardwood on Monday against Boston College in an exhibition game. Now, while these games don't really count, it is going to be the first time that fans can really lay their eyes on both programs ahead of what is sure to be a very invigorating hoop season. Both Sean and I will be at Mohegan Sun next week. We'll have coverage on Fox 61 and more on Connecticut Game Week.
Well, my shoes are still on, but somebody find Willie Nelson and get him a Huskies hat. UConn men's soccer is on the road again, hoping to follow a shutout win over Creighton by spoiling the party at Georgetown. UConn is 7-2-3 and still unbeaten on the road, 1-1 in Big East play after Villanova's upset win at Maroney Stadium. Georgetown hopes to bounce back from a loss to the Denver Pioneers.
Well, first show under your belt, Sean. How are you feeling now?
Well, it's the pilot episode, so I guess we're landing the plane now. I've been waiting to use that pun. You know I've been waiting to use that pun.
We're going to have more episodes every Friday right here on Fox 61 at 7 o'clock. Make sure you stay with us.